Hello and welcome to the Global Perspectives Show. I'm John Bersia, Special Assistant to the President for Global Perspectives at the University of Central Florida. Our guest today is Dr. Minxin Pei, a China specialist at Claremont McKenna College. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Pei.
It's a pleasure, John.
Tell us a little bit about your work related to China.
Well, my specialty is Chinese domestic politics, which covers a wide range of areas: leadership, decision-making, economic reform, political reform. But I'm also very interested in U.S.-China relations. And related to that relationship, of course, is China's relationship with Taiwan.
Now, we have a brand new program here at the university that focuses on the China-Taiwan relationship, and maybe we can start with that. This is an issue that has had its ups and downs over the past decades, but in the last couple of years has improved in terms of the relationship itself. So what is your assessment of how that is going and how it might play out over the coming years?
Well, it used to be a very volatile and dangerous relationship because of the pro-independence movement in Taiwan, and for a while they controlled the government. So a series of policies that government made generated a very dangerous dynamic. Fortunately, 2 years ago, a different government came to power, and that government, called KMT government, or the Kuomintang or nationalist government, has decided to take a different course. So now both Beijing and Taipei are in the process of reconciliation, rapprochement, and they made tremendous progress. Initially in the economic areas, but in terms of the overall relationship, and especially where the U.S. is concerned, the tensions, the military tensions, political tensions, have been reduced a great deal.
Now, recently there was an announcement about a U.S. arms sale to Taiwan, which was not new, but it was new in that it was finally playing out now, and there was a lot of complaining from Beijing about this. What was the essence of that dispute?
Well, the dispute has a long history. After the U.S. established a diplomatic relationship with mainland China, it ended its official recognition of Taiwan. But as part of the bargain, the U.S. pledged to continue to support Taiwan's defense, mainly through sales of advanced weapons. And this particular arms sales package was actually approved in 2001 by President Bush. It took a long time for Taiwan to come up with the money. At the time, President Bush approved something like $21 billion. 2 years ago, President Bush authorized the sale of about another $6 billion. So this is the second tranche. China, the weapon systems themselves do not pose a direct threat to China because these are mainly defensive weapons systems. China is very upset for the political reasons by selling arms to Taiwan at this point when Beijing and Taipei are in the process of political reconciliation. It sends a very bad message. Mm-hmm. It seems to suggest that the U.S. does not want to see Taipei and Beijing improve their relationship.
But you don't believe that.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I think you can overinterpret the political intent behind this because, in this case, because the decision was approved something like 9 years ago.
And also, if China did not complain about something like this, it would probably have problems domestically because people would wonder what was
yes,
what
of
was
course.
wrong.
It's a sort of routine. You can interpret China's protest as a matter of standard operating procedure. But at the same time, there are people in China who think that the U.S. is absolutely ungrateful. China is lending a lot of money to the U.S., and the U.S. reciprocates by doing something China knows that it does not like very much.
So you don't anticipate that this arms sale is going to cause any long-term problems in the
No
relationship?
long-term problems. Not, shall we say that, if U.S.-China relationship is supposed to turn in a very negative direction, it will not be because of this incident. It will be because of many, many other things.
Because I was recalling at the beginning of the Bush administration, which you referenced, the U.S.-China relationship was strained,
Yeah.
in large part because of the campaign in which there had been a tremendous amount of rhetoric about how we should move from a strategic partnership to a strategic competition.
Yeah.
And this continued for most of the first year of the Bush administration until 9/11.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, overnight, things changed again.
Yeah.
So how would you assess the relationship today between the United States and China? You see it as strong and continuing to move in a positive direction with some little hiccups along the way?
Well, I think right now it is a more mature relationship. It is a strong relationship in the sense that both countries know each other very well. They understand each other's national interests. They know where the boundaries are, what kind of lines not to cross, and they develop some kind of respect for each other, and they also have fundamental differences. So the ability to maintain a generally stable, cooperative, and productive relationship while sticking to their principles and then continuing to fight all kinds of bilateral battles, trade, human rights. Of course, the president met with the Dalai Lama yesterday, and that's part of the sort of the competitive side. When you can do all of these things, that's a sign of maturity.
Now, what do you make of the human rights issue specifically? There was a lot of criticism of this U.S. administration early on because there were some who thought it would take a much harder line on the human rights issue in China.
Yeah, I think it was not handled very well. The U.S. Probably should not have capitulated, should not have underplayed the importance of human rights at the very outset. I think China is, again, mature enough to understand that the U.S. will always raise human rights issues. Instead of saying that it will be not our priority, I think it would be much better to say that it will be one of our priorities.
Talk to us a little bit about the evolution of the leadership in China. For much of China's recent history, since the advent of communism, there's been this paramount leader concept, but the paramount leader seems to have become relatively less paramount with the passage of time. What does that
Well,
portend?
the paramount leader, the age of the paramount leader ended, I can tell you the date, January 1997, when Deng Xiaoping passed away. He was the last paramount leader. Of course, the first and the most powerful paramount leader was Mao Zedong. He was the leader of the revolution. He controlled the military. He exercised absolute, tyrannical, and unchallenged power. Deng Xiaoping was paramount, but he had a lot less power because, of course, he enjoyed a lot of prestige. He had other very important, influential colleagues, people whose names most Americans would not recognize. But Deng Xiaoping still could make very tough decisions all by himself, such as Tiananmen, such as opening up the country to the outside world and changing the direction of the country. Today, China more or less has a collective leadership. the president is nominally, or the president, or the chief of the Communist Party is nominally the leader, but he has to consult with his colleagues. And the party does not hide the fact that it's a collective leadership. Specifically speaking, President Hu Jintao today has 8 other colleagues on the standing committee of the Communist Party's Politburo. And any key decision is arrived at through consensus. He cannot say, this is what I think, and you have to do it this way or no way. He has to go around the table, hear everybody's views, and that creates a problem in decision making because it takes very long. Some key decisions really have to take a long time to be made. But surprise, surprise, they have kept the system more or less working since the end of Deng Xiaoping's era, 14 years ago.
Now, what do you think this current trend suggests for the evolution of the Chinese political system? Do you think because there is more of a consensus that we're eventually going to move toward a truly pluralistic system? Is it likely that the village election experiment, which has introduced an element of democracy into the Chinese system, going to be replicated at higher levels? I mean, what do you think could happen over the next 50 years?
Well, we see contradictory trends in China. The society itself actually is moving in a very positive direction. A much more complex society, increasingly urbanized society, a society connected with the rest of the world through the information highway. A lot of Chinese people are traveling. A lot of Chinese youth are being educated in colleges. Every year, China graduates 6 million college graduates. And then people are much more individualistic. They're more aware of their property rights, individual freedoms. So Chinese society is moving ahead in a very encouraging direction. Economically, there are signs of trouble because China used to be much more committed to market-based reforms, encouraging private entrepreneurship, privatizing state-owned companies, and then being part of the global economy. In recent years, we've seen the Chinese government giving more emphasis to the state-owned sector, especially in this crisis. The state-owned sector has received a lot of government loans, enormous expansion of their role in the Chinese economy. Politically, the trend is discouraging because you mentioned whether China will move toward a more pluralistic political system. The ruling Communist Party has said very openly, we're not going to do this. So the party is resisting. And we don't know whether it will succeed or not, but the party is not implementing any significant reforms that will make the Chinese political system more open, more pluralistic, and narrow the gap between an increasingly pluralistic society and a one-party dominated political system.
Well, do you see those two trends clashing at some point?
Oh, absolutely.
At one time, the Communist Party had absolute legitimacy, but now its legitimacy is much thinner. And
it's purely economic. So I think it will clash when the economic performance of the country, which is really the foundation of the party's legitimacy, deteriorates. And we know that it will deteriorate. At some point, China has had an excellent run for the last 30 years. But we know that economic performance is cyclical. It's determined by many other factors which a party cannot control. And some of the party's own policies are putting future economic prosperity at risk.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had mentioned relatively more attention toward the state sector by the government at present. And the trend for a long time had been toward diminishing the state
absolutely,
sector. Do you think the state sector could come to play the dominant role in the economy again?
Well, they are dominant in many important industries, energy, electricity, utilities, banking, financial services, aviation, transportation, you name it. I mean, if these sectors are in the hands of the government-owned companies, then of course they're not going to perform very efficiently, and then worst, they're going to block private firms from entering these sectors. So private firms cannot actually grow very large.
I'm wondering if you look as far into the future as you can, and we think about eventual outcomes of all of this that's occurring right now. What do you think China is going to look like? Many people have talked about the big Taiwan scenario, which has always been one I've enjoyed, because I thought that China might evolve as Taiwan did over a half century into a more open system. But you're saying the party is adamantly against it, and as long as the party is in charge, that will be the case. But if its legitimacy continues to be eroded in the event of some kind of economic catastrophe, then what could happen?
Yeah, well, the Taiwan scenario would be the ideal scenario. But as I said, the party does not want to go down that path. So there can be another scenario, that is a South Korean scenario, which is a much more positive outcome than a complete collapse. That is, at some point, there will be a crisis, and then the outcome of the crisis is a breakthrough to democracy. There's one big worry I have, that is, if the crisis happens at a time when the party is politically weak, can the party actually survive that crisis? So the honest answer is that we really don't know. But for the sake of China's own stability and the party's future, the Communist Party probably should start thinking about following Kuomintang's example. That is, it is better to start opening up the system a little bit more slowly, gradually, than sticking to a political system that will not work in the future.
And how do you see the Beijing-Taipei relationship specifically evolving? We've had two very encouraging years, but this is tied directly to the current administration in Taipei. Do you think that administration is likely to stay in office?
Well, that administration is likely to stay in office for another 6 years. Okay. So the good news is that until 2016, we're not going to see major upheavals across the Taiwan Strait. But the political dynamics inside Taipei are unpredictable.
And the forces that were pushing for independence before this administration are
still
there.
There's a small minority, probably 25% of the electorate, but they are very determined.
And vocal.
And so we don't know how they are going to behave. And of course, it also depends on whether the improvement in Taipei-Beijing relationship will yield the economic and political benefits that Taiwan's voters will find truly significant.
Now, so far that has been the case because the two economies are almost inextricably linked at this point.
Absolutely. But of course, China needs to make more concessions, withdrawing missiles and reassuring Taiwan about its peaceful intentions and so on and so forth. So a lot of things need to be done for even in the next 6 years for this encouraging trajectory to continue.
Now, the two sides have begun exchanging? I guess it's a very low-level type of official.
No, quite senior, because they don't have official recognition.
Not official recognition,
but
they're
they
high-level
have
individuals.
two organizations, quasi-government organizations, that deal directly with each other. The head of the organization on the mainland China side used to be a minister in Beijing, in charge of Taiwan affairs. And then the person on the other side used to be a vice premier. So these are very senior people.
They just don't carry the official
They
title.
don't have to, but everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
It's official, yeah.
And so positive relationship there means a positive relationship when you bring the United States into the triangle.
Yes, absolutely. Because the U.S., the last thing the U.S. wants to see is a crisis in the Taiwan Strait, because the U.S. will somehow be dragged into this crisis. So right now, the U.S., other than selling arms, which it feels that it's bound by its obligations, and also it believes that as long as China does not make military concessions, reducing its military deployment, the U.S. should keep strengthening Taiwan's military to maintain the military balance.
Now, you have published extensively in journals, news media, books, and so forth. Do you have a new book project in the works?
Yeah, if I stop appearing on TV, I will have time to write my book. That's a book on internal politics in China, local governance. It takes me forever to finish it.
So do you have a sort of an estimated time frame for that, or you?
Well, I hope I get the draft written by the end of this year.
Oh, good.
If I can.
And your last book, I understand, was recently or is being translated into Korean.
Oh, yes, I was surprised.
How did that happen?
Well, I don't know. All of a sudden, I got a letter from my publisher which says that a company in Korea has bought the Korean rights. Well, it's an academic book. It's about China, and it's considered a book with an interesting perspective.
But if it's being republished in Korean, then that could broaden your audience considerably.
Oh, yes. Well, it's a market of almost 50 million people. So, of course, if you can sell 1,000, 2,000 copies, I'll be very happy.
You would be happy. You have a trip planned to China or Taiwan or both in the near future?
May, yeah.
Oh.
I have my hotel booked, my tickets purchased, and I'll be there to China for about a month.
Good. Well, we'll talk again then upon your return.
Okay.
I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today, Dr.
Okay,
Pei.
thank you.
And thank you for the Global Perspective Show. I'm John Bersia, and we'll see you next time.